Human ambassador amazes Galactic Council. It's time for war. Part 1. The great dome of the Galactic Concordance shimmered under the twin suns of Virelis. Its walls made of living crystal that hummed softly with ancient energy. Inside, the air was cool and still, filled with the quiet rustle of robes, the click of chitinous limbs, and the low murmurs of 200 alien species gathered in uneasy peace. Each delegation sat in curved tiers that rose like petals around a central dais, their forms as varied as the stars they came from, some tall and slender with skin like polished obsidian, others wrapped in flowing veils of light, a few hovering just above their seats on silent anti-grav discs. The room was a tapestry of color, sound, and scent, woven together by centuries of fragile diplomacy. At the very edge of the lowest tier, almost hidden behind a delegation of feathered avians from the Cygnus Reach, sat a single human. His name was Daniel Hart. He wore a plain dark suit slightly wrinkled from travel, and no insignia marked his rank. He had no aides, no bodyguards, no floating data slates or shimmering holographic displays. Just a small leather-bound notebook and a pen. He looked more like a school teacher than an ambassador to the galaxy's most powerful assembly. Earth had only been admitted to the Concordance 6 months earlier. For centuries, humanity had been considered too young, too volatile, too divided to join the interstellar community. But after the discovery of stable warp corridors near Pluto and the peaceful resolution of the Martian secession crisis, the Concordance had finally opened its doors. Daniel Hart, a former university lecturer in comparative history and linguistics, had been chosen not for his political savvy, but for his deep understanding of how civilizations rise, fall, and sometimes choose to fight back. The High Speaker of the Concordance, a towering being from the gas giant Oryx 7 known only as the Luminal Voice, rose from the central dais. Its body glowed with soft blue pulses, and when it spoke, its words echoed not through sound but through thought, projected directly into the minds of all present. The Cathar hegemony continues its aggression along the Perseus Rim, it intoned. 3 more colonies have fallen. Refugees flood the neutral zones. The hegemony claims these are reclamation acts, not invasions. We must decide, do we negotiate further or prepare for what may come? A wave of anxious whispers rippled through the chamber. The Cathar were feared across the galaxy, reptilian warriors with armored hides, vertical slit eyes, and a culture built on conquest and consumption. They did not just occupy worlds. They devoured them, stripping planets of resources, enslaving populations, and feeding dissenters to their war beasts in public spectacles. No species had stood against them in over a century. Most chose appeasement, hoping the hegemony would grow satisfied and turn inward. One by one, the delegations gave their responses. The Zilari, insectoid diplomats with faceted eyes and clicking mandibles, urged patience. War benefits no one. Their envoy chimed in a series of high-pitched tones translated by the chamber's universal field. We must offer new trade concessions. The Von gelatinous beings floating in nutrient-filled globes pulsed slowly in agreement. Violence begets only more violence, their translator droned. Even the normally bold Krellin warriors, known for their plasma-bladed duels, suggested strengthening border patrols but stopping short of open conflict. Then came Earth's turn. A soft chime signaled the human delegation. All eyes turned to the back of the chamber. Many had not even noticed Daniel until now. Some exchanged glances. Was this a joke? A child sent to speak for a planet? Daniel stood slowly. He adjusted his cuffs, took a breath, and walked to the center of the dais. He did not activate the thought projector like the others. He simply spoke, his voice calm, clear, and human. It's time for war. The words hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then the chamber exploded. Gasps. Hisses. The Zilari envoy recoiled as if struck. A Von globe rippled violently. The luminal voice dimmed its glow in shock. Murmurs turned to shouts, then to demands for clarification. How dare a newcomer, barely spacefaring, suggest what elder species had avoided for generations? Daniel did not flinch. He waited until the noise settled into a tense hush. Then he continued, still speaking in that same quiet tone. We've watched your debates for months. You offer treaties while the Cathar burn schools. You send aid while they chain children to mining drills. You call it diplomacy. I call it surrender by slow degrees. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small data chip. With a nod to the chamber's tech servitors, he inserted it into the central console. Instantly, the dome's ceiling transformed into a star map, but not the clean, orderly version used in official briefings. This one was scarred with red markers, each pulsing like an open wound. These are human outposts, Daniel said, all destroyed in the last year. Not during battles. After surrender. The Cathar don't take prisoners. They take meat. The image shifted. Grainy footage played. Cathar dropships descending on a farming colony on New Oregon. Civilians waving white cloths. Then the slaughter. Not soldiers, but families. Then worse, the survivors being dragged into pens, branded, sorted like livestock. One clip showed a Cathar commander laughing as he tossed a child's toy into a smelting furnace. A few delegates turned away. Others sat frozen. The luminal voice pulsed faintly, its usual composure shaken. "You show us horror," said the Zalari envoy, voice trembling slightly. "But horror does not make war wise." "No," Daniel agreed, "but ignoring it makes peace a lie." He stepped back, hands clasped before him. "Earth doesn't want war. We've had enough of our own. But we learned something your histories seem to have forgotten. Sometimes the only thing more costly than fighting is not fighting at all." He paused, letting the words sink in. "The Cathar think you're weak because you talk instead of act. They think you'll keep talking until there's nothing left to save. Maybe they're right. But if even one species really stands, not as a victim but as a shield, others will follow." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had never truly seen a human before. "We're that species now." Silence returned, deeper this time. Not shocked, but thoughtful. The kind of silence that comes before a storm. Daniel walked back to his seat without another word. He sat down, opened his notebook, and wrote a single line. "They're listening." Outside, the twin suns of Virelis began to set, casting long shadows across the crystal dome. Inside, the galaxy held its breath. For the first time in 100 years, someone had named the truth, and truth once spoken cannot be unspoken. Human ambassador amazes Galactic Council. It's time for war. Part 2. The days after Daniel Hart's speech passed in a strange quiet. The Galactic Concordance did not erupt into immediate action, nor did it dismiss him outright. Instead, a heavy stillness settled over Virelis, like the calm before a storm that everyone senses but no one names. Delegates who once ignored the human now watched him from across the chamber. Some with suspicion, others with curiosity, a few with something close to hope. Daniel spent most of his time alone. He walked the garden terraces of the Concordant Spire, where alien flora bloomed in colors unseen on Earth, petals that glowed faintly at dusk, vines that hummed when touched. He did not speak much. He listened. He observed how the Zalari moved in perfect unison, how the Vaughn communicated through ripples in their fluid spheres, how even the proud Krellans lowered their voices near the memorial wall for fallen diplomats. He was learning, as he always had, not just what others said, but what they meant. Back on Earth, his past was simple. He grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised by his grandfather after his parents died in a transport crash. His grandfather had been a soldier once, not a hero, he always said, just a man who followed orders in places with names like Da Nang and Fallujah. But he never glorified war. Instead, he told stories of mistakes, of fear, of moments when ordinary people chose to do the right thing even when it cost them everything. Wars aren't won by generals, he'd say, stirring his coffee. They're won by cooks, medics, radio operators, people who keep going when everything says to stop. Those lessons shaped Daniel more than any textbook. He studied history not to memorize dates, but to understand patterns, how empires grow arrogant, how silence feeds tyranny, how courage often looks like stubbornness at first. Now in the heart of the galaxy, those lessons were being tested. The luminal voice summoned him to a private chamber 3 days after his speech. No audience, no recorders, just the two of them in a room lined with memory stone that absorbed sound and emotion. The voice's glow was softer now, more personal. "You shocked the Concordance," it said, its thoughts gentle but probing. But shock fades. What comes after? Daniel sat across from it, hands resting on his knees. "Proof," he said. "Not just stories. Not just anger. Proof that the Cathar are not just raiding. They're planning something bigger. He reached into his coat and placed a second data chip on the low table between them. This was recovered from a destroyed freighter near the Helix Nebula. Human scouts found it drifting. The ship's crew didn't survive, but their last transmission did. The luminal voice extended a tendril of light and touched the chip. Instantly, symbols flickered in the air. Cathar military code, raw and unfiltered. Daniel had spent nights with Earth's linguists decoding it. What they found chilled him. The messages spoke of Phase 3 operations. Not random attacks, but a coordinated campaign. Target lists included not just frontier colonies, but core concordance worlds. Virellis itself, the Zalari hive moon of Xylos, the Von breeding reefs of Tarnus Deep. The Cathar weren't just expanding. They were preparing to shatter the concordance from within. They think you're divided, Daniel said quietly, and you are. They count on it. While you argue over wording in treaties, they're mapping your power grids, your evacuation routes, your children's schools. The luminal voice dimmed. For a long moment, it said nothing. Then why should we believe this is real? It could be forged. A human trick to provoke war. Daniel didn't get angry. He nodded slowly. Test it. Cross-reference the signal origins with your own deep space monitors. Check the encryption keys against known Cathar command frequencies. You have the tools. You just haven't wanted to look, he stood. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust your own eyes. Later that evening, in his modest quarters, Daniel received a visitor. It was Lisa Morgan, one of Earth's few off-world officers. She wore a simple gray uniform with no rank pins. Another human habit, downplaying hierarchy. Her dark hair was tied back, her eyes sharp and tired. They're talking about you in the mess halls, she said, leaning against the doorframe. Some say you've doomed us. Others say you've woken them up. Daniel poured her a cup of reconstituted coffee. Real beans were a luxury this far from home. What do you think? Lisa took the cup, smiled faintly. I think you just gave the galaxy a mirror. And no one likes what they're seeing. She sat across from him. Command sent word. The Cathar hit New Carthage yesterday. Wiped it clean. No survivors. They left a message carved into the planet's surface. Next is yours. Daniel's hands tightened around his mug, but his voice stayed steady. Then we don't have time for doubt. The next morning, the Concordance called an emergency session. This time, every seat was filled. Even the reclusive Lumen, who rarely left their light-shrouded enclave, sent a representative, a shimmering orb that hovered silently near the ceiling. The luminal voice addressed the assembly. It confirmed Daniel's findings. The data was real. The Cathar were mobilizing for total war. Panic flickered through the chamber, but beneath it something new stirred. Resolve. Then the Zalari envoy stood. Earth's ambassador claims humanity understands war, it said, its voice sharp. But your species has only just touched the stars. Your ships are small, your weapons crude. What can you possibly offer against the hegemony's dreadnoughts? All eyes turned to Daniel. He didn't rise immediately. He let the question hang, heavy and honest. Then he spoke. We don't offer better weapons. We offer something rarer. The will to use what we have even when the odds say we shouldn't. He looked at the Zalari, then at the Von, then at every species in the room. You've lived in peace so long you've forgotten what it cost to keep it. We haven't. We've fought each other, yes, but we've also learned how to stand together when the world burns. That's not strength in metal. It's strength in spirit, he paused. Let us show you. The Concordance agreed. Not to war, not yet, but to a demonstration. A test of human capability on a dead moon called Kesar 9. Neutral ground, no tricks. Just Earth's best against simulated Cathar defenses. Lisa Morgan would lead the ground team. Kyle Dawson, a pilot with reflexes faster than most AI, would handle the air support. And Daniel would watch from the observation deck, silent as humanity made its case not with words, but with action. As the shuttle lifted off from Virellis, Daniel looked down at the glowing spire of the Concordance. He thought of his grandfather sipping coffee on a porch that no longer existed. He thought of the children on New Carthage whose names would never be spoken again. He didn't want war, but if war was coming, he would make sure humanity met it not as beggars but as equals. And maybe, just maybe, as the spark that lit the fire the galaxy had forgotten it needed. Human ambassador amazes Galactic Council. It's time for war. Part 3. The Dead Moon. Kesar 9 hung in the void like a gray scar. pockmarked by ancient impacts and stripped of air, water, or life. Around it, a ring of observation vessels floated silently, Zalari skiffs with mirrored hulls, Von globes drifting in formation, even a Krellin war barge painted in ceremonial red. Inside each, delegates watched through reinforced viewports or sensor feeds, waiting to see if the humans were bluffing. On the surface, Lisa Morgan stood in the dust, her boots crunching softly on the regolith. She wore a lightweight combat suit, matte black with minimal markings. Behind her, 12 human soldiers checked their gear, modular rifles, wrist-mounted comms, and packs that looked too small to hold much. To the aliens, they seemed under-equipped, almost careless. But Lisa knew better. Every item had a purpose. Every gram mattered. Above, in a low orbit, Kyle Dawson ran final checks on his fighter, the Streak. It was small, barely 30 meters long compared to the hulking alien warships nearby. Its hull was scarred from training runs, its engines tuned by hand, not by factory bots. Kyle called it temperamental, but he loved it like a brother. He keyed his mic. "Ground team, you ready to make us look good?" Lisa's voice came back dry. "Just don't crash before the show starts, Kyle." The test was simple in design, brutal in execution. The Concordance had seeded the moon with automated Cathar-style defenses, turret drones, sensor mines, and holographic enemy units, programmed to mimic hegemony tactics. The humans had 1 hour to secure a central command node, disable 3 perimeter emplacements, and extract without losing a single team member. Failure meant proving Earth was not ready. Success might change everything. At the signal, the mission began. The first wave of drones activated instantly, rising from hidden pits with a hiss of steam. They fired stun pulses, not lethal, but enough to simulate combat stress. Lisa didn't shout orders. She didn't need to. Her team moved like a single organism. 2 soldiers laid down cover fire while 3 others sprinted forward, using the moon's craters for cover. 1 soldier dropped a small disc on the ground. It unfolded into a portable shield, shimmering faintly as enemy fire splashed against it. From orbit, Kyle dove. The Streak screamed through the thin exosphere, banking hard to avoid simulated anti-air fire. He didn't fire missiles. Instead, he released a cloud of microdrones, tiny, buzzing things that latched onto enemy sensors and blinded them for precious seconds. It was a trick Earth's engineers had developed after studying insect swarms. To the Zalari observers, it looked chaotic. To Lisa's team, it was perfect timing. "Eyes up," Kyle warned. "Second wave coming, bigger this time." True to his word, 3 heavy assault drones rolled over the ridge, their treads grinding stone. They were built to mimic Cathar shock troops. Slow, armored, relentless. Most species would have called for air support or retreated. The humans did neither. Lisa tapped her wrist. "Morgan to Reyes now." A soldier named Reyes, barely 20, sprinted sideways, not toward the drones, but toward a collapsed tunnel entrance. He tossed in a canister. A moment later, a controlled explosion shook the ground, not to destroy, but to collapse the ridge above the drones. Rock and dust rained down, pinning 2 of the machines. The third turned, confused by the shifting terrain. That was all the opening they needed. 2 soldiers flanked it, firing focused pulses at its joints. It staggered, then fell. The whole sequence took less than 20 seconds. In the observation chamber aboard the Zalari flagship, the envoy leaned forward. "They did not overpower it," it clicked to its aid. "They outthought it." Back on the moon, the team reached the command node, a dome of black alloy guarded by a final holographic Cathar commander that snarled and lunged. Lisa didn't hesitate. She pulled a small device from her belt and slapped it onto the dome's access panel. It wasn't a bomb. It was a data spike, loaded with a virus written by Earth's cyber warfare team. Within seconds, the dome's lights flickered and died. "Node secure," Lisa reported. 37 minutes in, Kyle said. Plenty of time for coffee. But the test wasn't over. The Concordance had added a surprise, a simulated communications blackout, cutting the team off from orbit and each other. In most militaries, this would cause panic. Orders would stall. Coordination would break. Not here. The humans switched to hand signals, pre-rehearsed and precise. They moved in pairs, covering each other's blind spots. When one soldier twisted an ankle on loose rock, 2 others adjusted their path without a word, forming a human crutch. They didn't wait for commands. They anticipated. High above, the Von delegate watched the fluid movements on its screen. Its globe pulsed a deep indigo, its version of awe. They do not rely on hierarchy, it murmured to its aide. They rely on trust. Finally, the extraction point. A small shuttle hovered 10 meters above the surface, ramp down, engines roaring. The team sprinted toward it, weapons ready in case of last-minute traps. None came. They boarded in perfect order, last man checking the ramp before sealing it shut. Mission time, 52 minutes. 0 casualties. All objectives complete. Silence filled the observation vessels. Then slowly, the Krellin war barge flashed its running lights in salute, a warrior's honor. Later, back on Varelli's, the Concordance held an informal debrief. Delegates crowded around Lisa and Kyle, asking questions not about firepower but about training, about how humans made decisions without constant oversight, about why they carried so little gear. Lisa explained simply, "We train for chaos. On Earth, systems fail. Weather changes. Enemies adapt. So we learn to think, not just obey." Kyle added with a grin, "Also, we've got really good coffee. Helps with the long nights," but it was Daniel who spoke last. He hadn't been on the moon, but he'd watched every second. "You saw tactics," he told the assembly. "But what you really saw was culture. Humans don't win because we're stronger. We win because we refuse to quit. And when one of us falls, 10 more step up, not because they're ordered to, but because they choose to." The Zalari envoy stepped forward. Its usual sharp tone was softer now. "Your people move like water, flowing around obstacles, filling every gap. We thought you were disorganized." "We were wrong," Daniel nodded. "Disorder is just order waiting to be understood." That night something shifted in the Concordance. Not a vote, not a treaty, just a quiet change in how the other species saw humanity. No longer newcomers. No longer weak. Something else. Something dangerous in the best way. In his quarters, Daniel received a message from Earth Command. New intel. The Cathar were massing near the Helix Nebula. A full fleet. Bigger than any before. He looked out at the stars, thinking of Lisa's team on that gray moon, of Kyle's laugh over the comms, of his grandfather's old stories. The demonstration was over. Now came the real test, and this time humanity wouldn't be alone. Human Ambassador amazes Galactic Council. It's time for war. Part 4. Despite the success on Kessar 9, the Galactic Concordance remained divided. The demonstration had impressed many, but not all. The Lumen delegation, cloaked in shifting veils of silver light, still refused to endorse any military action. "Violence corrupts the soul of peace," their speaker whispered through the chamber's translator. "We will not stain our hands with blood even in defense." Others echoed the fear, not of the Cathar, but of what war might do to their own societies. The Vaughn worried about ecological damage. The Zalari feared economic collapse. Old habits of caution ran deep, deeper than reason. Daniel Hart understood. He had spent weeks meeting with delegates in quiet corners of the spire, sharing meals, listening more than speaking. He knew their concerns were real, but he also knew time was running out. Then the Cathar struck. It happened on the neutral trade hub of Elysia Prime, a bustling station where merchants from 50 species exchanged goods, data, and stories. It was protected by Concordance peacekeepers and shielded by ancient treaties. No one believed it would be attacked. They were wrong. The assault came at dawn cycle. 3 Cathar cruisers dropped out of warp without warning. Their weapons tore through Elysia's defenses like paper. Within minutes, the station's core was breached. Civilians ran in panic as Cathar shock troops flooded the corridors, not to occupy, but to destroy. They smashed data archives, poisoned water recyclers, and herded survivors into cargo bays, many of them human traders who had come to sell earth-grown fruit and hand-woven textiles. By the time Concordance reinforcements arrived, it was over. The Cathar ships were gone. The station was a tomb, over 2,000 lives lost. Among them were 37 humans, including a young medic named Tanya Ruiz, who had been treating 6 Ilari children just hours before. News spread fast. Grief turned to rage, but also to shame. The Concordance had promised safety. It had failed. In the emergency session that followed, Daniel did not shout. He did not point fingers. He stood at the dais and played the last transmission from Elysia's control tower. It was grainy, filled with static, but clear enough. A human voice, young, scared, but steady, said, "Tell Earth we held the line as long as we could. Tell them we didn't run. Then silence. The chamber was utterly still. Even the lumen's veil stopped shimmering. Daniel spoke softly. "We don't ask you to love war. We ask you to stop pretending it won't come for you if you ignore it. The Cathar don't care about your treaties. They care about your fear. And right now they think you're afraid." He paused, then laid out a new plan, not total war, but a surgical strike. Intelligence from Earth Scouts and Zalari deep-range sensors showed a Cathar command node hidden in the asteroid belt of Gorus 7. It wasn't a fortress. It was a nerve center, coordinating raids, processing slave shipments, planning the next wave of attacks. Destroy it, and the hegemony's grip on the Perseus Rim would weaken for months. "And Earth will lead it," Daniel said. "Our ships are small but fast. Our pilots know how to fly in chaos. We don't need glory. We just need your support. Your sensors, your stealth tech, your silence until it's done." To everyone's surprise, the Von delegate rose first. Its globe pulsed a steady green, the color of commitment. "We will lend our cloaking fields," it said. "Not for war. For justice." The Zalari envoy clicked thoughtfully, then nodded. "Our long-range scanners will guide your path. And our engineers will upgrade your comms to bypass Cathar jamming. Even the Krellans offered plasma charges. For precision," their commander growled. Not for show. Only the Lumen remained silent. But they did not object. That in itself was a victory. Preparations began at once. Lisa Morgan coordinated with alien engineers, adapting human gear to work with Von stealth systems. Kyle Dawson trained with Zalari pilots, learning their evasion patterns. The mission would be called Iron Bloom, a human name chosen because even in war something new can grow. 3 days later, the strike force launched from a hidden Concordance dock. It was small, just 4 human frigates, 2 Von stealth spheres, and a single Zalari scout ship. No flags, no fanfare, just quiet determination. The journey to Gorus 7 took 12 hours. Inside the lead frigate, the Aurora, tension hung thick but controlled. Lisa moved among her team, checking gear, sharing quiet words. Kyle ran flight sims in the cockpit, his hands steady on the controls. When they reached the asteroid belt, the Von cloaking fields activated. The ships vanished from sensors, slipping between rocks like ghosts. The Cathar node sat in the heart of a massive iron asteroid, its entrance guarded by 2 patrol drones. Kyle took point. He flew the streak low and slow, using the asteroid's magnetic field to mask his engine signature. At the perfect moment, he released a swarm of micro-drones, not to attack but to mimic a meteor shower. The Cathar sensors locked onto the false signal, turning just enough. That was Lisa's cue. Her team launched from the Aurora in armored drop pods. They hit the surface with soft thuds, rolling into cover before the Cathar even knew they were there. Using hand signals and wrist comms, they moved toward the entrance. One soldier planted shaped charges on the blast doors. Another jammed the internal alarms. Inside, the node was a maze of red-lit corridors and growling machinery. Cathar guards patrolled in pairs, their scales glinting under harsh lights. But they were slow, confident. They never expected an attack here. The humans struck fast. Stun rounds took down the first patrol. A second team disabled the main power relay. Lisa led the final push to the command core, a circular room filled with holographic star maps and snarling Cathar officers. She didn't hesitate. She threw a pulse grenade, not to kill but to overload the systems. Sparks flew. Screens shattered. The central data core began to melt. "Time to go," she ordered. They retreated the way they came, moving faster now. Behind them, the charges detonated in sequence, clean, controlled, total. The asteroid shook. The node collapsed inward, sealed forever. Back on the Aurora, Kyle guided them out as Cathar reinforcements arrived too late. The strike force vanished into the void, cloaked once more. When they returned to Varelli's, the Concordance was waiting. Not with cheers, but with something deeper. Respect. The luminal voice addressed the assembly that evening. Today, Earth did not seek conquest. It sought to protect, and in doing so, it reminded us what unity truly means. Daniel stood among his people, tired but proud. He looked at Lisa, at Kyle, at the faces of those who had risked everything. The war had not ended, but the galaxy had finally chosen a side, and humanity was no longer alone. Human Ambassador amazes Galactic Council. It's time for war. Part 5. The victory at Gorus 7 changed everything. It was not a grand battle with fleets clashing in fire and thunder. It was quiet, precise, and over before most of the galaxy even knew it had happened, but its effect rippled through the concordance like a stone dropped in still water. Species that had spent generations avoiding conflict now saw something new. That war, when chosen with care and carried out with honor, could be a shield, not just a sword. Within days, delegations that once doubted Earth now sought its counsel. The Zalari shared encrypted battle logs from their ancient wars. The Vaughn offered to train human engineers in fluid-based stealth systems. Even the Lumen, though still refusing to bear arms, began sending medical drones to human outposts, small spheres of light that healed wounds and purified air. They called it atonement through care. The luminal voice convened a special session of the Strategic Command, a council usually reserved for elder species with centuries of military tradition. This time a human chair stood among them. Daniel Hart sat not as a guest but as a member. He wore the same simple suit, but now it carried weight. When he spoke, others listened, not out of politeness, but because they had seen what humanity could do. The Concordance formally authorized the Coalition of Free Worlds, a unified force drawn from dozens of species. Earth's fleet, though small, was given command of the Perseus Vanguard, a frontline unit tasked with rapid response and reconnaissance. Lisa Morgan was named its ground operations lead. Kyle Dawson became flight commander of the newly formed Skyward Wing. They were no longer just Earth soldiers. They were the galaxy's. Yet Daniel knew the real test was not in battle, but in trust. He spent his days not in war rooms, but in meeting halls, helping alien diplomats understand human ways, and helping humans understand theirs. He explained why humans valued individual choice, why they questioned orders, why they laughed even in dark times. In return, he learned how the Zalari made decisions through collective thought, how the Vaughn measured time in tides, how the Krellans honored fallen enemies by singing their names into the wind. This quiet work mattered as much as any strike mission, because war would not be won by weapons alone, but by unity. Then came the call from New Carthage's ruins. A scouting party had found something in the ashes, a hidden data vault, buried deep beneath the colony's old schoolhouse. Inside was a final message from the colony's mayor, recorded as the Cathar ships descended. She spoke not of fear but of hope. "Tell them we remembered who we were," she said, her voice calm. "We were teachers, farmers, dreamers. And when the end came, we stood together. That is enough." Daniel played the message before the full concordance. No one spoke afterward, but many wept in their own way. The Zalari by shedding iridescent tears, the Vaughn by glowing a soft gold, the Krellans by placing a hand over their heart cores. That night, the Coalition launched its first major operation, Operation Dawn Shield. The target was a Cathar slave processing station orbiting the dead world of Zira. Intelligence said thousands were held there, from a dozen species, forced to build weapons for the hegemony. The plan was bold: strike fast, disable the station's engines, free the prisoners, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. Lisa led the boarding teams. Kyle's fighters cleared the skies. Vaughn cloaking fields hid their approach. Zalari jamming pulses blinded enemy sensors. For the first time, the Coalition fought as one. The battle was fierce but short. Cathar guards roared in confusion as humans dropped from ceiling vents, as Vaughn drones shorted their power grids, as Zalari snipers picked off commanders from impossible angles. Lisa's team reached the holding cells and cut the locks with plasma torches. Inside, thin, weary faces looked up, some human, some not, but all lit with sudden hope. "Come on," Lisa said, her voice gentle but firm. "You're going home." Over 3,000 prisoners were evacuated. Among them was a young Zalari child who clung to a human medic's hand all the way to the rescue ship. When asked why, the child clicked softly. "You came for us, even though we did not come for you." Back on Varelli's, the freed prisoners were welcomed not as victims but as witnesses. Their stories spread faster than any fleet. The Cathar were not invincible. They could be beaten, and the galaxy, once fractured, was learning to stand as one. In the weeks that followed, more worlds joined the Coalition. Even neutral systems sent supplies. The Cathar, for the first time, began to retreat. One evening, as twin suns set over the crystal spire, Daniel stood on the observation deck with Lisa and Kyle. Below, alien and human engineers worked side by side, repairing a damaged Vaughn transport. Laughter floated up. Human jokes, Zilari clicks, the soft hum of shared purpose. They finally see us, Kyle said, leaning on the railing. Not just us, Daniel replied. They see what we can be together. Lisa handed him a cup of real coffee, beans grown in a hydroponic garden aboard the Aurora. What now? She asked. Daniel looked at the stars. The war was far from over. The hegemony still held vast territories. More battles would come. More lives would be lost. But something had shifted. The galaxy no longer waited to be saved. It was saving itself. We keep going, he said. Not as Earth, not as Zilari or Vaughn, as something new. Inside the Concordance chamber, the Zilari envoy bowed deeply as Daniel entered for the next strategy meeting. A gesture once reserved only for equals in age and wisdom. The luminal voice glowed warmly in greeting. Even the lumen's veil shimmered with quiet approval. Daniel took his seat. He opened his old leather notebook and wrote one line. Peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of courage. Outside, the stars burned bright, and for the first time in a long time, the future felt like something worth fighting for.